afternoon. After Daniel Anderson reads to us his wonderful poems, we're going to have a little reception out in the dining room, where the coffee is. And then this evening, after John Casey's reading, we are having our first open mic in Benedict Hall. And I think there were still some slots on the sign-up sheet at the inn. So following John Casey's reading this evening, you can go again in the dining room, grab yourself a snack, grab yourself a beverage, and then head over to Benedict and enjoy still more excellence. The book raffles are also happening. Sean Griffiths and Joe Schuster, are you here? I have a book for you in the kitchen. And Sean, I'm keeping that book. Shane? Shane's book is my book. But the raffle sheets for Danny and for John Casey's books are at the end. And I think there were maybe 2 pages on the clipboard, and people didn't see the second page and didn't sign up for it. But you'll figure this out. Go to the inn and investigate the clipboards, and you'll crack the code. I believe that's all I have at the moment. So let's welcome the man with the bluest eyes on the mountain, Danny Anderson.
All right, just a heads up, if you're gonna do the randomizing book contest, come. Or you will be booed in your absence, and you'll feel it shudder down your spine. Let's see here. I'm gonna start with Last Things First. It's a poem called Epilog. Because the guests have all gone home and sunlight sculpts its late geometries across the littered lawn, because the time for such simplicities is rare, I'm sitting in a high-backed wicker chair as summer ends. The tireless bees that make the apple branches hum have found the garnish tray. They come in pairs, grow drunk on sprigs of mint and lemon wedges, then hover off to work the riches of their sweet tree. I'm thinking of our neighbor Franklin Sloan, who spent this August afternoon persuading someone else's wife to walk the nature trail that skirts the lake, and of the lovely Mrs. Chase, who sat in this same high-backed wicker chair, braiding and unbraiding her gold hair while Sloan persuaded her. Between the pines, a brightly sequined water shines, and they may be there still, reluctantly departing from their shore, as small masts like tired arms of metronomes rock mildly in the geriatric wake of a pontoon boat that prowls the lake. And whether they regard their fall as frill or something more profound, I cannot say. It is no matter. The saw-toothed shadows of the ferns distend. A mound of cocktail ice grows clear beneath the boxwoods where it was pitched like some dismantled melting chandelier. I regret to tell you, Mrs. Chase, you've left your pocketbook behind. It darkens by the cord of winter wood. A folding chair out on the grass where your fine yellow sweater hangs enjoys a soft cashmere embrace, and evening's cloakwork steals the other half of your already half-forgotten face. From here to there. She's talking to herself. The woman on the subway next to me. Maybe it's someone else who isn't there, a sister or a thankless child, the husband I can't see. Her tones are serious and low, and though I can't make out the words, the who or when or why, whatever's being said, it isn't good, and seems to fluctuate between apology and blame. Commuting into darkness side by side, our tin-type negatives appear on the graffiti-etched and grease-streaked windows of the train. We jolt and whip and chuck along at dumb, erratic speeds. In all that racket, it is clear she is, in fact, addressing me. my narcissism, my ingratitude. Past chambers and canal, my petty jealousies and endless list of thwarted plans. Through 8th and 23rd and Herald Square, all my colossal failures as a friend. At one time or another, you must know you've disappointed each of us. Just shy of 42nd, she relents. It's not entirely your fault, of course, the way things were. Perhaps this really is the best you could have done. A hiss of brakes, the cry of metal wheels on metal rails, and this is 57th Street, where I will rise, shuffle step, elbow out, negotiating as I go past an exhausted nurse, the quiet waiter nuzzled in his book, and a disheveled Wall Street broker who has just pulled out a can of beer. I climb into the nimble, bright Midtown Manhattan afternoon. I'm relatively sure I comprehend what loneliness and sorrow are, but they've traveled further off, to Forest Hills, North Riverdale, Astoria, Jamaica, Queens, or back to desolated Sheepshead Bay. The walk up 7th Avenue is brief, and Central Park, exploding into leaf, is wealthy with the alternating airs of fresh, hot, sugar-roasted nuts, loose hay, and carriage horse. One seldom feels so ruthlessly alive. Remember this, crocus and daffodil, old flannel men at chess, the robin song, a busy smear of taxis gliding by, and looking seriously on, washed in an otherworldly shine, those stately, tall, impossible hotels. Never make eye contact with a crazy homeless person. And that's really good strategy in tight urban transit situations, but it's also an exceptionally good policy in English department meetings. Easter Sundays, which came up in conversation last night. These yellow April evenings, I, no longer idealistic or inclined to wish my life were something that it's not, sip gin and tonics and enjoy a fragrant breath of just mown grass. Immaculately laned front lawns are flower-crowned, our windows bright and clean. The lime wedge bobbing in my glass suggests an effervescent, new, and utterly surprising thought of green. Who could complain? Yet some surely will, about the pollen count or lack of rain. Not me. No one is happier than I to watch the sprinkler's grainy rainbow spill across broad vacancies of watered light, or study sun-glazed copper weather vanes stamped against the cloud-flown April sky. But still, it happens nearly every spring. A blossom stroll through Holy Week, Good Friday off, and then that sadness Easter Sundays always bring. It's hard saying exactly why. It's not as if I even go to church, though there are those who wish I would. Why isn't it enough just being good? Extending charity, I mean, kindness, compassion, concern, and love, all things I like to think I do. Who needs an organist and choir, a brass collection plate, the priest, and an excruciating pew? Truth is, it's something that I've often understood, a deep desire to believe and belong, communion in a stony, cool, and solemn atmosphere, women who dress and smell like fresh-cut flowers, men starched and ironed, splashed with aftershave, the comfort someone's looking after us. That kind of reassurance has a price: worship with purpose, prayer on time, ice cream socials, driving kids to camp, reading to shut-ins, selling Christmas wreaths. It's not enough just being nice. And I suppose I understand this too. But what about the ones who get it wrong, who do all this and still despise the stupid and the ugly and the poor? Will they, like me, be reassigned when someone in the afterlife gets wise they really weren't so swell? Perhaps they celebrated God in song, tithed 10%, and kneeled to pray, but then two-timed the marriage, harbored hate against their neighbors, screwed a friend or two. Not even really anything that's new. It's just so dull. You'd think they'd preach a little less, not judge so much. But who am I to say? It's just so dull, that righteous indignation of the blessed. My next-door neighbor hates my guts. At least when we talk politics, he does. He loves me like a brother, though, when we talk gardening, cooking, music, dogs. We plan long weekend trips we'll never take, wine country or the coast. Our families eat together once or twice a week. This is not paradise, I know. This is not paradise, it's only home. And yet, imperfect as it is, it would be difficult to disagree, another Easter days away, that home seems just about as flawless now as it may ever be. You tell people you live in Eugene, Oregon, and immediately they get images of, potheads in drum circles plotting the overthrow of capitalism. And, here's an example. And it's kind of true. In December, I woke up one morning to the local NPR anchor saying that the Occupy Eugene protesters have vowed that they will not leave their camp until all their demands are met. And I am not lying to you when I tell you the next sentence was, the protesters have yet to submit a list of their demands to City Council. It's like, that's awesome. But somehow we managed to move into a neighborhood in which everyone's political opinions, and I'm not just talking adults, I'm talking 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, are diametrically opposed to mine. And it's most of the time, fellowship trumps partisanship, which is a lovely thing, I think. And it's true, but every now and then the wheels come off the wagon, usually around the nightcap. And somebody will say something, and then I turn into Joe Pesci in Goodfellas, and about 3 seconds later, we're all yelling like a bunch of hillbillies. And then miraculously the next day, it's sort of this, hey, y'all, how you doing? So life in the suburbs. Anyway. The hills, beautiful hills. The attic still smells of boredom, sawdust, mothballs, and the rain I climbed up here to watch decades ago as it congealed softly into Sunday snow. I've come again to lose myself among these stale, outdated clothes, bad landscape paintings, a stern dressmaker's dummy and a fox, the rusty eyeless stole that guards it all, framed needle points, mismatched crutches, a paper sack of agates and postcards, Niagara Falls, Mount Rushmore, and the Hoover Dam. Or this one here, in which an ice-green Chrysler glides through autumn in New England. The woods are writhing and alive, emphatic with persimmon hues, with mustard, pomegranate, and plum. But in the old Dutch master's boxes, these packs and mackerel Satterfields, and all these silver-splashed dements suggest an age of mercury, magnesium, and lead. In living rooms, the color of trout, in low-slung kitchens stained with cigarette and iron skillet smoke, on rickety porches looking out across magnetic Appalachian fields. My disappointed, coy, and awkward kin seem always caught distracted on some lonely lane of thought and bothered into smiling when they would rather not. It's easier to love them now, Aunt Bernadette and her retarded son, our brill-creamed uncle and his second wife, the snowy-headed feeble few whose bedsides reeked of vapor rub and tea, and all these tarnished dead I never knew, canasta players, servicemen, a graduating class of nurses, and this barefooted, nameless girl who walks her nickel-eyed, emaciated hound. Listen, you can nearly hear the moist and muffled static sound of a half-tuned radio, but it's just the rain on the roof that drowns the rowdy laughter down below. The cackle, tease, and boast of cousins on a raw November day, who, having warmed themselves with wine, will shortly feast on simmered apples, yeast rolls, and a roast. How pleased and mild he looks here, our granddad Claude, relaxing in the old Savannah swing, in what must be his 66th or 67th year. His days, they say, grew deeper into silence, darker into doubt. Was it the child they lost in 17, the 2 world wars in which he never fought, the heart attack? Was it the prison term that no one ever talks about? His charcoal sweater zippered to the chin, he lets the clear, thin light of early spring rinse over him. Meanwhile, those West Virginia hills behind him roll away, diminishing like love or memory or even loss, in galvanized percentages of gray. Epithalamium in a minor key. Having caught him in a slight and thoroughly inconsequential lie, we watched him turn from us and wade into a small, elegant cartel of women beneath a water oak where he now smokes a cigarette alone. The evening has the glazed and calm enameled look of ornamental eggs. Tree branches are laced with paper lanterns and necklaces of tiny ivory lights. Filled water goblets gleam. The bride-to-be, wearing a lemon cocktail dress and pearls, seems chiseled from the very sun. We know few people here and find ourselves in conversation with a gas and oil man from Baton Rouge, 2 groomsmen, and the shy, well-meaning priest, a surgeon from Rhode Island, and then we're somehow milling next to him again. He'd like to clarify a certain thing he may have said before. Don't be absurd. We wave it off. This weekend, all our causes are benign. We mingle. We manage to avoid opinion and belief, conservative and liberal, hawk and dove, Big Ten and SEC. No one, so far as I can tell, is giving anybody grief over abortion or Afghanistan, gay marriage, or the Fed. We're overly solicitous. Wow, that should really make me think the use of that word, shouldn't it? We're overly solicitous instead, accommodating and sarcasm-free. Nobody scoffs or cracks the sneer that says, "You poor uneducated schmuck. You've swallowed all the propaganda, eh?" Miraculously, we find only pleasantries to say about the long distances we've come and the picture-perfect weather. We praise this rented stone estate, its columns, the Italian marble stairs, and dazzling cut-glass chandelier. We remark how smitten they both look, the almost bride and nearly groom we're here to celebrate. Tomorrow, in the stained glass chapel light, wood polish and the pepper scent of lilies hanging in the godly air, a few may cry. A few may privately suppose there are no happy endings waiting there. Someone will screw around, or worse, someone will have to watch the other die. To see them, though, so pleased, so poised, so dashing and so overjoyed, it isn't difficult to think these just may be the seldom two who will never raise their voices in a rage or covet some lost solitude, whose gentle, healthy children will obey, whose mild hearts may on occasion drift, as even mild hearts will sometimes do, though never truly stray. After the psalm and organ-driven hymns, after the homily, the vows, that kiss, wishing them happiness, if nothing else, we wish them this. All of my in-laws are LSU fans. And the night we got married was the night of the LSU-Florida game. And there was at the house where we had our reception, some people in the room were there, had a little TV about this big, and all of these huge, strapping, rowdy Cajuns were around watching the football game. And my Aunt Janet, who was about 5'1" and 160 pounds and feet about this big, waddled in between them, parted the sea, flipped the television to the Ohio State-Wisconsin game. And they're like, what the fuck is that? And I've always thought of Aunt Janet as the father I never had. Insomnia at 46. Hours like these, we sit here in the satisfying dark. Wind whistles at the chimney cap. A bird's eye maple clock keeps cadence, knock by hollow, polished knock. Though she's been dead 10 years, my mother and I explain ourselves. Together we admire the blue reversals of the mantel mirror, the cat-like quiet of our street, and her antique mahogany buffet. Hours like these, there seems so much, yet even we both know there is little left to say. My mother, who was never very young, or happy, or at ease, and I agree. Our history seems ever slight beneath each cold, unshattered, far-flung star. Antares, Castor, Vega, Acamar, that crackles in the midnight overhead. I prefer to think I would know how to love her many sorrows better now, and she suspects that's true. Hours like these, the disapproving boy I was still sees her raging inward long debates, those fixed, bewildered eyes and pinched pursed lips, the subtle tremor of her head. What were you saying, Mother, and to whom? And what, in turn, from that strange other room was also being said? Teaching the Merchant of Venice. They reek of alcohol and sweat, my Thursday morning students who proclaim it's party week. Sound familiar? It's only 8 a.m. Imagine my dismay. Is it so goddamn easy to forget, an inner voice inquires, that you would have been hungover too? Bloodshot, if even here at all, you self-righteous jerk. Daydreaming about intercourse, longing for bed, and leering out on those soft golden cello notes of sun, the mustard yellow maples, and the misty mid-October air? Fine. So I blunder on about the play's sundry problems, Antonio's ennui, these ruthless Christians, and the squeamish coexistence of the comic and the cruel, etc., etc. They bear it with a patient shrug. Not 30 minutes in, I see it shining there. Act 3, Scene 1, ever so slightly coiled, a strand of Susan Kelly's chestnut hair. It is her Shakespeare, after all, or rather was, until she graduated, packed her life, left me her books and 10-speed bike, then shipped to Africa for mission work. Outside, the glossy autumn morning grows cantankerous with several squabbling crows. Their fracas punctuates the drowsy leaden silences in here. We'll write, we told ourselves. We'll call. 2 years from now, we'll pick up just where we left off. Things seldom end so well. Hilarious Toledo girl, blue-eyed, briefly imagined college bride who figured that I wouldn't understand the loneliness, the stress, the other boy. They planned, not then exactly, but in time, to be engaged. She cried a little, then was gone. When she apologized, it's true, I didn't understand. Forgive me, Susan Kelly, for the stunned and sulky undergraduate I was. I've certainly forgiven you, wherever you are now, where it is surely apple season too, if not homecoming week, when all our ghosts of being young are born. These sophomores fidget in their seats. Their pens make curlicues, fishnets, primitive huts, flowers and fields. Bassanio, Portia, Tubal, Shylock, all are waiting in another room where love and justice doubt that any of us ever gets it right. I'd like to look her up sometime, not out of jealousy or lust or anything like spite, but maybe just to have a laugh, to say, I found this strand of your brown hair, etc., etc. And by the way, I went to Venice once. I saw the White Rialto, the Great Basilica, and the Piazza San Marco. I stood a while and gazed into those questionably green, unsavory waters of the Grand Canal. It was autumn. The light was quite magnificent, a bluish gold. I know that it's been years, and this is anybody's guess, but still, I think you'd like it there. In vino veritas. In wine there is truth. It's a terrifically paradoxical statement. If you are, if you're drunk, you think everything you say is true and brilliant. And of course, from the other angle, drunkenness often reveals character. So it's a sort of one of those love is blind kind of phrases. It's just to say, be careful over the next 10 days, people. In vino veritas. Over sliced apples and a wheel of cheese, pale crescent moons of honeydew, and 3 plump golden loaves of bread, we lift our glasses, lean them into light, and each of us, as through a jeweler's loop, admires the ruby and balsamic hue, or something in between garnet and tourmaline distilled into a rich molasses brown. Chocolate, someone muses. Michigan cherries and a kiss of sage. Tobacco and the slightest ghost of clove. There is a lull until the fellow next to me identifies cracked pepper, orange zest, blackberry, and vanilla bean. Though not to be outdone, another says these grapes were punished early by the cold and wet, then rescued through a long and providential miracle of sun. Who wouldn't want to call to mind a similar heroic year, or recount with a dreamy look the way one woman does a weekend at this very same chateau, the vintner's ancient Saint Bernard, his fetching broken English, and his wife's delectable Coquille Saint-Jacques. It gets so boring anymore, listening to others tell you what they know, then somehow having to respond as if you truly cared. And yet, who can afford in proper company to say the other things out loud? In the 2 decades we've been friends, I've never really liked you very much. On occasions, I have imagined having sex with Maxwell's wife, or this, all snowy afternoon, I've been uncomfortably aware that everyone I know will someday die. It's early still. I don't suppose if I slipped out to walk the frozen quarter-mile home that anyone would notice, much less care. But surely I'll discern, I often do, after latching the door and deadbolt lock, a different kind of quiet waiting there. Here there is laughter, talk of berries ripened on their summer vine, the elemental taste of husky fruit, mineral and time. 2 conversations over, I can hear Maxwell's intrepid voice grind on about our taxes and the goddamn poor, when 3 mole-colored silhouettes appear, 2 yearlings and a doe, their huge and darkly almond eyes. Half curious, half terrified, they freeze among the cedars looking in. And for a moment, it's enough to make even Maxwell shut his yap. 3 silent creatures on the silent snow, those peach and lightly rose-pink evening clouds, and like a fastened antique pin above the cedars, also looking in, a giant pearl apostrophe of moon. This first hot Saturday in May. Obviously not a poem written in Oregon. Tough crowd at the Bijou. That's a rain joke, people. This first hot Saturday in May. The plump governing bees discover our tomato blooms, our squash and watermelon blooms. They tickle, kiss, and plumb the open velvet flower heads of iris and hibiscus blooms. They levitate and drift among the purple hanging clouds of blossoming wisteria. This first hot Saturday of May, the doused and dripping garden smells of green. The catbird and the electric finch, the feisty jay and oriole, nip thistle, millet, milo seed, and corn from feeders I have filled. The world has come alive with energy and appetite and all the grand astonishments of sex. It used to be the only thing I ever thought about. Cleavage, athletic legs, tan lines, tight jeans, and lacy bras. Now it's the nest egg and the ass at work, a water heater that's about to blow, election politics, and how it feels the globe is going all to hell. This would have seemed miraculous, if not entirely impossible to me, a quarter century ago. What do the young expect? I guarantee it isn't this, a mortgage and a morning picking weeds, the pleasurable shade and savory tobacco scent of mulch. Our fig tree and our lemon tree survived an April frost. Now they relax in clear gold light. And this, I confess, this brings me joy. But more than joy, it brings a thankfulness that I'm no longer young, uncertain, and obsessed. Besides, it isn't youth I want. Who needs the grudges and the big ideas, the idiot decisions and the hurt? It isn't youth I want, only the high, luxuriating sense beneath these clean and excellent procrastinations of the sun that certain days, this one, may never end. Sunflowers in a field. Sunflowers in a field, goldfinches everywhere. They gorge on seed. They rise to rest along the power line, then fall like drizzled lemon drops, like lozenges of candied yellow light. 2 weeks a year, goldfinches gather on sunflowers here, These evenings after supper, you see them in the honey-soft glow, as if they'd trapped and somehow stored the rapture of September's sun. You see goldfinches flicker among sunflower lanes, through mortal tides of light, through streams of apricot and chardonnay, and you resolve to live your life with greater sympathy. Sunflowers bowing their char-black dials, their petals twist and writhe, like fires, like silk coronas blazing west. How inconceivable, then, the pewter-making cold front clouds, the shabby settlement of crow and wren. Though no one hears the oath, you shall, you tell yourself, forgo deceit, increase the tithe, atone, forgive, embrace. You watch goldfinches and sunflowers both begin to fade. By subtle green degrees, they shed that bullion luster of the sun, until the finches ricochet like flints among the drowsing flower heads. Perhaps, as I have done, you'll pace the darkening half-mile home, intent on picking up the telephone to reconcile with long-lost friends. You will apologize, concede. You'll vow to never, ever, ever let such distance grow again. But then you reach your door and find the day diminished to a thin blue rind of light above the township silhouette. How nice a hot bath sounds, dessert and herbal tea. Perhaps you'll read the arts and leisure pages of the daily news. With every stair you climb, sleep settles just a little more behind the knees, beneath the shoulder blades. The calls, you tell yourself, perhaps some other time. Thanks.